I think we're all good. Yeah, so welcome to today's session. My name is Terence for those that maybe are joining in for the first time. So I'm your lecturer for public organizational design and development. It's one of those modules that I like because it's so connected to what others are studying, as well as known as foundations of public administration, public management, and governance. The two modules for me, they are so connected in a sense that in public administration, you deal with the whole government things. And then in this one, you actually dealing with how do organizations get designed and developed, and what are those theories that actually establishes the foundations of any kind of government department, government organization, or any public institution, as well as private. But in most cases here, we normally deal with public organizations or government organizations, because that's what you'll be tasked to do after you complete your qualification. Because one thing that is a problem, or might cause a problem in the long run, is having to lead a department, because don't underestimate your time being here right now. In the next 2, 3, 4 years, you never know where will you be. You might become a manager of some sort, and you'll be required to actually reevaluate, or let me just say, reassess the organizational structure of where you'll be working. And one of the good things that you must understand is this module that, no, man, I have studied what we call public organizational design and development. So I remember in one of our classes, we dealt with theories of organizing, and then that could actually help you. So the theories that we're gonna look at is the start of your mental transformation, in terms of what is it that you must think first before you restructure or you design any organizational organogram or organizational structure. Very, very important to remember. So any unit that we deal with has to have a learning outcome. What is it that you must be understanding? Or let me just say, what is it that you must know after this unit? So there are a few things that you must have studied or have learned. The first point there says, by the end of this unit, students should be able to describe the theories of organizing and public organizational structure and design. So it might look like something that, yeah, you should know, but one thing that I understand in terms of learning outcomes is that this is something that you should take out of the class. Take out when you study. Don't just study to memorize. One thing that you must understand about our modules, they are very, very deep in terms of practical application, because when these modules were designed, they were designed by people that actually worked in universities as well in the public service. So whatever they are saying here, it is already what the government or the public organizational structures are being designed on. So again, students should be able to identify different theories of organizing. Why is that? Because there are so many theories that you'll find out there. So the first thing, you should be able to know which one is relevant for your department that you'll be responsible for. Number 3, make sure that you understand the business process. I think in this case, we have about 9 principles that I'll be sharing with you, but more information will be given in the study guide. But for us, it's just to understand what is the purpose for those principles. Very, very important to understand. Principles precede your work of restructuring. In other words, if you get the foundational principles or the foundational theories for restructuring your organization, be rest assured that in the long run, you're going to have issues when things don't go according to your plan. Again, you should be able to identify principles of organizational design. That's what I was talking about. We have about 9 of them. And then comprehend, meaning that you must be able to understand deeply the regulations or the regulatory framework that underpins organizational structure. And so what we're trying to there is that frameworks or policies or acts that already are being established by our South African government that must be followed when you restructure any kind of nation. Very, very important to understand, because you see what you're saying here, these are all principles, but one name, one. With the way it's more like a process that you must follow so that you are able to execute your organizational structuring very well. So you must be able to identify the key decision makers needed for organizational restructuring. Don't take that lightly. In every organization, there's a team of experts, people that I remember talking to one of in government. They are educated ministers, people that want to do everything according to the book, but some of them, they are so afraid to make tougher decisions. This is where your political heads, like your ministers, come into play, where they take tough decisions that might endanger the longevity of that organization, or might lead that organization to be one of the best government department in the country by providing services. So the reason why managers might be so afraid to take big decisions is because they don't want to be held at the national settings where you have to go to parliament and account as to why did you make such a big decision for your department. You can't. And they also respect the political head, which is your ministers for that particular department. So that's why they're so afraid to just make any decision. In fact, they have so much little authority in terms of making decisions. So those are some of the things that you need to understand as you deal with organizational restructuring. Again, you must be able to mention key stakeholders that you must first consult during the designing and restructuring or structuring of your organization. Why do you have to consult? One of the wicked things that most departments do or does is lack of public engagement in terms of what is it that the public would like the government to change. Because sometimes I feel like government departments, probably not all of them, some of them, when they come up with new ways of restructuring their department, they hardly do consultations. Even if they do, maybe you find that they only deal with experts. And it's good, but it's also not good, because experts, they must be informed by the needs of the society, the people that actually have to deal with the consequences or the outcome of restructuring a particular organization. Let me just give you an example. Imagine SASSA wants to reduce the social grant, right? They just say maybe you're getting your 350, and SASSA decide to give you 250, and they don't tell you about that. They consulted experts to say that, you know what, we're going to give them 250, we cut 100 Rand because that's a lot of money that we're giving them. Imagine how will that make you feel if you're receiving the 350? You're going to get mad, you're going to say whatever you say against the government, but at the end of the day, you're not going to change their decisions. But at the end of the day, you'll have a frustrated community of citizens being angry that why the government changed something so big without consulting with them. Sometimes you might say, okay, maybe they had to make tougher decisions. That is one thing that I was saying about this certain political figure, to say that They say they sometimes they make tougher decisions because no one wants to make that. Can you imagine if you are the manager who decided to cut the money? People, if they knew where you stay, I'm telling you, they'll come and burn your house if that's possible. That is why you have heard of cases where councillors or mayors and their houses being burned around the areas. It's because they know where they stay and they know that they are the ones that make those tougher decisions. So it's very tough to change things in government because it makes others happy, but it also makes others unhappy, and they can go to an extent of burning a political head's house. Very, very important to understand. But we shouldn't be afraid to deal with change. So those were your learning outcomes that you must understand first, so that you will be able to, remain in touch with the Unit 3. Now, this is just the introduction of Unit 3. I'm not gonna read that, but I can just read the first statement, or maybe let me just use the second statement. So since we're dealing with theories in organizing or organizational restructuring, there are scholars that have developed such theories. So these scholars, in their fiber, they believe and think on similar lines about the subject, and they will most of the time try to influence others to think and believe as they do. Why? Because if you begin an organization and you want to do something new, that thing that you want to bring about as a change, it begins as an idea. So you need other people to think like you to be convinced that your idea will actually work within the organization. So these different groups can either be identified by analyzing their belief and way of thinking in a specific matter by way of the major characteristics that they highlight. So what that statement actually means is that because ideas can be brought about based on beliefs or based on culture, morals, ethics, or standards, and so forth within an organization, you really, really need to make sure that you convince your whole workforce to actually come out to say that we believe in your idea and we believe it's been a long time, we need some change. And that's all you need for everyone to actually agree with you. So there are actually various definitions that you must understand, or let me just say important terms and definitions that are found within Unit 3. And these definitions are very, very important for you to understand, because as you go through the whole unit, you'll be coming across words like theory, organizing, systems, and you will need to know what is it that they're talking about. So I'm not going to read all of them, but we'll just deal with theory because that's the main concept of Unit 3. So what is a theory? For some, a theory is a system of universal beliefs that shall be able to describe a phenomenon or an activity. In other words, this system of theory or this system of belief, it actually brings you ideas as to why a specific activity needs to be undertaken. Again, it must also be able to explain why a particular activity has been taken, or either has been successful or unsuccessful. So very, very important that a theory must be able to predict what could happen if a particular condition applies in regard to the phenomenon under scrutiny. So what we're actually saying here is that a theory, number one, it must explain why something occurs. Again, it must also actually it describes and then it explains why something occurs. Again, it also has to make you understand why a particular thing that or activity that was undertaken became fruitful or unfruitful. Very, very important. And to some extent, a theory must be able to predict what will happen if you ignored certain elements or aspect of some sort within an organization. Maybe let's just assume that you're taking on a project about unemployed graduates. you want to understand that if the government do not come up with a very effective way to come up with a very, very convincing program to absorb, all this talent. Number one, it might be that they might leave the country, go to other countries, look for employment. Others might give up their qualification and begin to work in one of the more, or maybe in the most dehumanized field of work. Some might even resort into crime. You're predicting what could happen if there is something that is not being done correctly. So that's just system, or maybe let me just say that's what we call a theory. Very, very important. Now, yeah, I think we'll also look at organizing systems. We just passed that one. We'll move to the next one. Organizing, because we're dealing with theories of organizing. That's the main thing. So organizing is a process. When something is a process, it means it involves steps that must be taken so seriously in a sequential form, meaning that you cannot go to step 3 without passing step 1 and step 2. If you do, you're going to miss out on some important things. So that's why it's a process whereby an interrelated network of authority. So authority, we're talking about your top management, lower management, middle management and lower management functions and communication and positions. These are where your authority must be communicated effectively, so because they are the people that are going to be affected by the process of organizing. So what you want to do while you're organizing is that you want to create and maintain and also make purposeful action by individual or through individuals and possible groups that you have within your organization, so that everything that you do within that organization is orderly done and structured, and everybody else know that their department is the department of human resource development. This is what they deal with. This is like your revenue, or let me just say finance, or this is your section transport or transport section, or this is your vet. This is what, these people are being organized and being employed and being placed in their right stations, because at the end of the day, only those that are qualified and experienced can be able to undertake a particular project within their specific area of study. Very, very important to understand, because that's what organizing is all about. So, other important definitions, a lot of them, but I think you have heard something about what it means to be effective, what it means to be, when we say there is efficiency in government. So these definitions are already there. I'm going to provide you with all of this, but I'm looking at the time and I want you to really pass your first assessment number 1. But you're going to go through this. You see the way I read a definition and try to explain it. If in your assessment number 2 or number 3, like say maybe in your exam, when you ask a question, it might come and say, define the concept of effectiveness. And then you just say the ethical standard of effectiveness refers to the achievement of predetermined goals or doing that which is right. And then it says define and explain for 10 marks. Let's be honest, you're not going to get 10 marks for that. So here's how you tackle such questions. So when it comes and say define the concept of effectiveness, you can know that definition, but what you're going to do is you look at the first element of the definition, which is ethical standard. Now you're going to go deep and think about what are some of the ethical standards that you can think of. So if you're a public administration student or you're doing this qualification, the first thing that should come to your mind right now is section 195 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa of 1996. That's where you find all the principles and values of public administration, where it says public administration must be development orientated. That's the first ethical standard that there must be, you know, public administration must be development oriented, and then you explain what that means. You can use so many examples just to deal with that first element of what it means to be ethical standard, and then achievement of predetermined goals. Here you can use, for example, let's just say your SWOT analysis, where you're going to be able to say, okay, these are the opportunities. I can give you as much examples as you want, but that will be coming from you as a student to show your creativity, to show that you read, you study, and you understand. So you will see that most of the modules that you have already, they do connect somewhere, somehow. So if you still remember what you learned from other modules, you don't have to take that information, but you can use some of the examples just to connect in terms of how you understand each concept. So that is what it's all about. So today it's all about theories of organizing. So the theories of organizing, they're so complex, but I tried to summarize them. But you'll have to read them in your own special time. I know that some are working, some are students, or some are doing the qualification on part-time basis. One thing that I will advise you, at least each and every day, make it a point that you read something on a specific unit. If you don't, trust me, there's a lot that you must study. This is not your only module, I know. But make sure that you read something, have time, have your own timetable, read, study, understand. If you don't, please email me. I'll assist you in a very possible way. Now, there are criticism, or maybe let me just say beliefs, or let me just say systems that are being used over the years that helps achieve effective organizing, because organizing, remember, is one of the principles of public administration. Remember, there's an acronym that they use, it's called POSCOP, and one of the letters there stand for organizing. So organizing is that thing that makes the organization to be properly and orderly designed and structured. So here's the thing. In organizing, the first thing that you must understand is that you must know what is the priority of your organization. And then once you capture that, and they say that we're going to restructure the whole organization for the next 6 months. Number two, what you're going to do is that you're going to organize your groups, your experts, people that know what to do, when to do, and how to do it. Those are the people that you need. So for them to be able to be governed properly, there are theories that you find in this unit, whereby you need to understand how each organization is or could be designed. Because some organizations have like 30 years, 40 years, 15 years. It depends who designed it. Because remember, each and every organization began as an idea. Even this module that you are listening to me right now, it began as an idea first, and then today here we are. Very so, these three sub theories, and then the first one there talks about classical theory. Now, when we talk about classical theory, guys, I want you to be so that things so simple. So remember that in your time, people talk about classic music. In this case, it is a theory that was designed for that classical time, or for those. It's more like an old thing, but still works. You understand? So that's what classical theory is all about, but we're going to get into it for you to understand it more further. And then number two, we're dealing with the behavioral theory. So if you're a public organizational design and development student, you should be able to understand that, no, man, this theory has to deal with how people behave within dynamic. You cannot manage how someone has to think in a job, because that will be more like modern witchcraft, getting into their brain, telling them what to think or to do. You're going to really, really mess up their psyche. So open system theory is one of those theories that says, you know what, you cannot control everything. Let people be. Let there be what we call adaptability, robustness, effectiveness, efficiency. And for you to achieve such things, you really need to let people think creatively, because people have dynamic brains. So they give different ideas, and that's how innovation gets born. So this includes at least three sub-theories. System theory, it's more like something that will be designed within an organization and allowed to be used. So we call it system theory. So environmental theory, this one very, very important. Each and every time an organization is being designed, before you do that, you must look at your environment, your political environment, your economic environment, your social environment, and so forth, so that you know how to guide the designing of your organization or the restructuring of your organizing. Now, the contingency theory. This is where it says organizations should not just have one-sided system or one-sided plan that does not understand that for others to improve is because they had to explore other fields or other spheres of designing and restructuring their organization. So these are the theories that we'll be dealing with. So what I did now was that I tried to summarize these theories. I'm not going to go through all of them, because I tried to explain them in the most simplest way. But you see how nice they are. They're just in a box. When I send you, you're just going to read them there, and you're just going to add from your study guide so that you understand what it's all about. So the first one being the classical theory. Classical theory, because like I said, it's more like an old thing that still works even in the modern times. That's what classical theory is all about. So the first part of the classical theory is that first time we say scientific management. So scientific management was designed by a guy or by a scholar that is called F.W. Taylor. So F.W. Taylor was one of the management scholar who was working in the, I think he was working in the engineering field. This guy realized that one of his companies or one of their companies was not doing so well because of, I don't know, maybe the bureaucratic theory or bureaucratic system that was still applied even in the private sector. So they realized that for them to have effective managers and employees, they need to design what we call scientific management. So scientific management, this one emphasizes mostly on the increase, or let me just say it aims to, maximize productivity with the aid of time and motion studies. Very, very important. Why? Because at the end of the day, what you want is productive workforce. And for productivity to be experienced within your organization, you need to give people time to think, to come up with strategies on how to tackle problems. And then point number two about scientific management is that they need to motivate staff, not just by giving them salary, but by giving them incentives. That's why it says financial incentives there. So at least you can thank them, give them something in return, that if you do achieve this, we'll be able to, give you something, a reward. So, and the third point is have distinct divisions of work within highly specialized workers, meaning that you had to separate your engineers, your doctors, your electricians, and so forth. Why? Because that's when you're going to have a very effective room. Can you imagine having a room filled with accountants and doctors? These people don't speak the same language. That one will be thinking about saving, bookkeeping and statement of accounts and so forth. The other one will be thinking about doing a surgery and so forth, depending on what kind of a doctor is that person. So you need to separate them based on their specialized knowledge so that they can grow and develop very, very innovative ways to come with uh, fantastic solutions. Last point there, distinct hierarchy of authority. At the end of the day, authority must be understood and it must be done in a proper manner, meaning that you don't bypass what the top management is saying by just allowing the middle management to do or to disobey what their top management wants. Now, again, the theory also deals with administrative theories. So these are theories that normally focuses on managing the whole organization. Administrative duties, your your management of finance, staff, and so forth. So these are duties that we're looking at. Then bureaucratic theory steals under. So when you say about bureaucratic, the kind of theory that was developed organizations back then were designed. So he disliked them on a personal level to say that people are playing in government organizations. So what we need to toughen up these organizations was to come up with characteristics that will actually make public organizations to be strong and efficient. So he came up with characteristics. I remember the first one he talked about, there should be a well-defined hierarchy, meaning that you need to develop order of authority where people will know and understand that things that come from the head office need to be rightly attended to with some matter of agency. Very, very important. And he also said that there should be imperfect relationship between managers and employees, meaning that you don't go and have some friendly, romantic relationship with your manager, but what you do is you maintain a professional relationship with your supervisor, your boss. There's nothing that goes beyond that. So that's what he believed. And in our modern societies, that is very, very important to maintain, because you look at how things get destroyed is because of this uh, uh, managers having romantic relationship with their employees, and then they forget to be so tough on their employees in terms of delivering on their, but what I'm going to say is that this one emphasizes much on the significance of studying people as behaving individual in an organized setting. So it studies human relations, motivation, their happiness, what satisfies them or what's important to them, and so forth. So this brings about the lesson that management cannot control human behavior by using money or a sole motivator, or by just using the principle of scientific management. In other words, must decide to do. You don't give them money for them to do it, because if you stop giving them money, then it means they will stop behaving the way you want. So that's what the behavioral theory is all about. So the open system theory also studies the complexity of management and organizational phenomena within an organization. What that simply means is that there are very, very, very broad ways of managing your organization. And that can be a very, very complex process for you as a manager, because you'll find yourself in a very, very tight situation trying to manage everyone by the way you're so used to it, and it might not work in every situation. So these are some of the definitions. These are the theories that you must go and look at them. You see how many are they? I'm not going to touch on all of them, but I did have some time to write them down and try to, reduce them to a level of your understanding. Very, very important. Now, there are what we call public organizational structure and design. Very, very important, meaning that organizational design work includes more than designing a structure, because it involves you first. It requires you actually to understand the imperative for change and environment. So one thing that is guaranteed within an organization or within anyone's life that is listening to me right now is change. Things have to change. Even if you don't change, things will always change, because every time you see prices being changed, you see the petrol or the fuel levy changed, you see the tax changing, you see the VAT changing, you see everything changing. So all of that, you see political parties changing, you see managers being changed from this job to this job. So everything changes. So what do is you must understand the times that you are at and be able to adapt and actually accept the change and adjust your environment. Why? Because if you don't, as an organization or as a business, you're going to lose on your clients, you're going to lose on business deals that you try to be stubborn, not to listen to the changes that were made. And again, you must also be so awake to a level that you know which legislative framework was being implemented, amended, or repealed, and so forth, because that is the way that you're going to grow. So I remember I was reading a statement of a former student, and then she was saying that she did what we call advanced diploma with the University of Mpumalanga. So this one time she went for an interview, and then when she got there, the HR people were so confused to say, in this post, we needed someone with a degree, and you only have advanced diploma. What is that? And she had to explain to them that no, advanced diploma is the same as a degree. We no longer use BTECs. They were still caught up on BTEC thing. And you see, this company, trust me, they were not well informed about the changes within the educational community. So they were still caught up with BTECs and so forth, because they normally say degree or BTEC. They don't say advanced diploma, because BTEC is no longer offered. So that is what you need to understand. Designing and testing new models or structured, as I was saying, that's your work as a manager. You need to be continually planning, managing the transition so that you can change the old structure to the new one. And then you must be so effective in terms of implementing change and monitoring the change, because you'll find people within the organization, they still want to use the manual paper-based systems to render services within government. These are the people that don't want to bring about the digital technologies to improve the rendering of services. Like, you can cut a lot of people coming to your government department or building just to ask for, let me just say something so simple. Let's say, what is the most simplest thing that people want? Yeah, proof of residence. You see people going to their municipal building just to go get that paper, while they can just access it online and then print it wherever they are, or just have it on their phone and update it whenever they want. But because they don't want to change, and because they want to do whatever is it that they do, they keep using that old and traditionalized manual paper-based system. But those are some of the things that it tells us that most government departments, they still do not want to embrace change because they are afraid of losing their cake in the government. Maybe there's a tender that helps them to continue that project. So those are some of the things that organizational change and theories allows you to do. So, like I said, there were business processes in organization that you need to understand. These are the processes. There are 9. In case you come across a question that asks you about business principles to be considered, these are the principles: strategy, process, structure, output, geography, technology, market, risk, dependencies. So these are fully explained in your study guide, but I just wanted you to know them, that they are there. They are 9. So anytime you see a question from this module talking about principles or business principles, just know that we're talking about these ones. Very, very important. So in terms of strategy, strategy is what's going to help you to execute your plan. It's one of those plan of action that helps you to actually do something. You know, when you're planning, you're writing down things in words. But when you say strategy, you're taking what you have planned, and then now this is your plan of action. How are you actually going to take what you've been writing down or documenting for all this time? Now it's time to actually execute it. And then the second one is process. As you're busy executing or planning to execute your plan, look at the process that you are undertaking. Look at the steps that you're following, and how that becomes your structure as an organization. And also check your output, your results, or your outcomes, because at the end of the day, you want to see results. And also your geography, you want to look at where your impact is being made. And then also check issues of technological advancement. How is technology affecting your organization? And how is the market reacting to that? As the market reacts, and then what are the risks that you must be aware of? And then what are the dependencies that you must be aware of as well? So those are some of the principles that you must be aware of. So these principles are defined and discussed well in your study guide. Very, very important under learning unit number 3. Now, like I said, as you're busy doing the process of restructuring your organization, you must follow what we call the regulatory framework or legislative frameworks, because this is when you get to plan the organizational structuring process very well within your department. And you also make sure that you're following the correct legal and administrative procedures in your organizational structuring. And so also to avoid unnecessary legal cases that can delay you because of using incorrect procedures. And also, it can also help you minimize risk of non-compliance. So the goal here is that you want to comply with the government and how they want you to comply. So these are some of the legislative frameworks that we are talking about when we say legislative frameworks. So you talk about your constitution. Remember, I was talking about section 95, where you find your principles and values of public administration, to say that public administration must be development orientated. There must be transparency, accountability within your organization. So as you are restructuring that, you must be able to define systems or places, or let me just say the manner in which you want your employees to report and account when given a certain task. So your Public Service Act, for those that work within the public sector, they know that this will show the roles of the Minister of Public Services and Administrators. How do they deal with the remuneration of employees, termination of employment, service condition. Those that are working in government will know what I'm talking about. And then, your transfer or horizontal transfer, and so forth. So those are also supported by public service regulation. When you appoint someone, you make sure that you appoint them in terms of the Public Service Act so that you do not contravene with your contract, term of contract, and so forth. So your Public Finance Management Act of 1999 and Treasury Regulation, this is one of those legislative framework that helps you as an organization to have a healthy financial bill within your organization, to follow the roles or maybe the duties of an accountant, your CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and so forth. So all this you'll find within this act. And then Labor Relations Act, everybody has a right to have, your right to any union, to join any union, and then not to be dismissed unfairly. Everything is found within these acts. And then collective agreements, what we mean here is that within your organization, or let me just say within the executive, led by the president and cabinet ministers, there's what we call collective agreements, meaning that the ministers are to be acting within the parameters of collective agreement. What the president says or establishes within their department, they must follow that. In other words, they have to be loyal to your leader so that you speak the same language. That is why ministers also will not challenge the president, because they can take you out of the job. They can fire you just like that. Why? Because the president has the powers to appoint and not to appoint any minister at any given time. They can do that. That is why sometimes you remember, those that will remember that case of the former president, Jacob Zuma, where the finance minister thought that he still had the job. When he woke up, he found that he changed him. Next thing, he swapped them. Put this one, fire that one, take this one. Those is what we that's the like does that it's more like ministers began to act outside what we call collective agreements. Very, very important. So we also have white paper on the transformation of the public service. So it's formally known as the Batupilo principles. The 8 principles of Batupilo. I believe now we're at 11. For those that are in government, they know what I'm talking about. We've added those principles. They're no longer 8, but for the matter of our class, you can still look at 8. But for more, you can look at the 11 or 12. I'm not sure, but they keep on adding most of the time based on what public service is all about. So departmental policies and legislative mandates, these are normally designed by the DPSA, the Department of Public Service and Administration. They do this. They deal with minimum capacity requirement for certain functions as well. So these are some of the legislative frameworks that you need to understand and be so good at remembering. So lastly, we have principles of organizational design. Remember, there are 9 business principles in organizing. And then you also have 9 principles of organizational design. Those were business principles. These are principles of organizational design. Don't confuse them. Very, very important. So as we begin, you have 9 principles. I don't think I'm going to go through them because of time. What I want you to understand is that understand what we mean when we say declare amnesty for the past. So when you declare amnesty, is that you pardon the political influences of some people. Now, in 1994, when we first got our democratic country, or when South Africa was declared a democratic government, they declared many people amnesty for the past. Why? Because now we're reaching, or it was a new dawn for them. It's more like a new day. You need to take on your leadership roles. You need to get into work and transform the government for the betterment of your society. Very important. So what they did again is that they were trying to fix the structure of the apartheid government. But they did not do it first because they did not know how. They were still learning. That's why some of the legislative frameworks were introduced in 2001, 2002, 2005. They were still learning because all they had was political power. They were just political thirsty. They were not experts in government. They did not know because they were not forming part of that apartheid government. And then make the most of the top talent. That's why when you look at the first ministers that were employed back then, it was the people that actually were taught. But as much as they didn't have much governmental experience, they did try their way to focus on what they could control and promote accountability. You remember that the country back then, most of the things were still cheaper, you know, even our GDP grew and so forth. Why? Because they were still trying to fix things, unlike now where there's a lot of lack of accountability, corruption, and going on. So, guys, this is what I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining. I'm just going to stop sharing so that at least we can just have a little talk and so forth.